aí, rapaziada. Esse é o bonde da CDD. Alô, Cidade de Deus. Se liga. Presta atenção.
Hello and welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I'm hooked on a feeling, da, 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 da. I'm high on believing, da, 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 that you're in love with me.
And I'm Gary, and today we're going to review and discuss City of God, which came out in 2002 from directors Fernando Meirelles and Kátia Lund. Iain, why don't you give us the synopsis for City of God?
Well, the story follows a young guy called Rocket who is growing up in the local slums in Rio de Janeiro known as the City of God. We follow his narration and his kind of life build-up as he details to us all the different crime lords and crime that happens in the City of God. As we watch him grow from a young child up to his early 20s, we see his interactions with a couple of the notorious crime drug lords known as Little Z and Benny.
E se ficar o bicho come. E sempre foi assim, desde que eu era criança.
I love how this film opens up. It's kind of disorientating. You hear all these weird noises, this ambient noise of the street, and you see this knife being sharpened, and you're like, wow, this film's opening up with a bunch of jump cuts and sounds, and it's you're kind of compelled to pay attention. And then you follow this chicken. and the humor is brought in as well. So you've got this weird sort of sense of tension with the knife being sharpened and this chicken being gutted and thrown in the pot. And then these close-ups of this chicken looking petrified, who then manages to free himself and escape. And I'm like, what is this chicken run? what is this? And then the chicken is chased by a bunch of what would appear to be a bunch of hoodlums who chase this chicken until they're confronted by the police. And everybody's armed. And you have this one character at the middle of right at the center of this. And the camera does an amazing trick where it pans around him and we teleport back to the late 60s.
Yeah.
And it's just brilliant storytelling right there with camera work, with the handheld camera, the 360 camera work, the going back in time, having the narration, all within the first couple of minutes, and you're spellbound, you're transfixed. It's a foreign language Brazilian film with subtitles, but it doesn't matter. You're there because of the camera work.
I remember the first time I watched City of God, I was working through my friend's DVD collection because I'd literally watched everything I owned like 50 times. And I kept seeing the front of the cover. You know, you get the chicken underneath the title City of God, and you've got the image of the gang stood there with all their guns out. And I was just like, is this film for me? I don't know. It's a foreign film. You know, I wasn't too big into foreign films back then. And I kept watching everything else around it. And then I was just like, right, I've watched everything apart from this film. Let's get it on. And like you said, that opening, it hooks you. You're just like, what's going on? What's with the chicken? You know, who's this guy narrating to me? You know, telling us that, you know, we can't know too much of the story yet. And then that was it. It was put onto my list of greatest films ever made.
Well, this film has gone on to win multiple film awards. It's been put down as one of the must-see films, one of the films you must see before you die.
Yes.
And I absolutely put it in that category as well. This is one of the best gangster movies ever made. It really is. And I like the setting for this film. Rio de Janeiro, even though they didn't actually film in sort of the most notoriously dangerous areas, which are overrun with drug trafficking.
The gangs kind of just, you know, they sheriff themselves, don't they? The police will not go in there.
Well, it's due to corruption as well.
Yes. The police are corrupt, the government's corrupt. You know, you've got your innocent people that try to live there. But it's like Rocket says at the beginning, you know, the beast either gets you if you try to run or eats you if you try to stay. And that basically translates to us of damn if you do and you damn if you don't.
So the directors were like, okay, so if we film in there, we probably won't make it to the end of the shoot. So we'll film over here. And the directors have even gone on to say that even though they chose another area of Brazil which sort of seemed familiar to the City of God, they still ran into a lot of trouble with gangs and gun violence throughout filming this. And it's also interesting that sort of 80% of the actors in this film had never acted a day in their lives before.
Yeah.
They were all sort of recruited or hired after they sort of went to these acting centers, and the directors and casting agents just auditioned thousands of these kids from the favelas and just went, yeah, and hired all these people. Some of the actors in this film even gone on and said, we still don't want to be an actor, but, you know, we took the pay. And
Yeah.
it does hurt me knowing a little bit that a lot of the actors, they didn't know whether this film was going to be successful or not, and so at the time they were kind of offered you can take $3,000 now and that's it, or you can sort of take 1% of all sales down the line of this film's release, and nearly all the actors just took that one pay slip because it's the most money they'd ever taken in one go.
Yeah.
So it's a shame that the actors didn't quite get paid enough. And out of all of the actors in the film, there's only really one that I recognise, and she would appear in the Predators 2010 version.
No way. No fucking way. What?
You missed it.
I completely missed that bit. Oh my god. Oh my god. I'm just shocked.
So all the actors in the film deliver an outstanding performance. And this is one of the things I really like about the film, is that there are so many characters. You have your central character, and really you have Rocket and Little Dice as your sort of main protagonist and antagonist, and you really follow their lives. But there is an assortment of other characters in the film that come in and come out. There are side characters that interact with other side characters, and then those side characters come back to your main characters. The film really builds up the world, and the setting for the film is a character in and of itself as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you are not into gang films, or even, you know, I'm not even talking fictional gang films, like Scarface. You know, I put Little Z up there with Tony Montana. Little Z, he starts off as Little Dice, and at a young age, he is off the fucking chain. You know, he's following around in the early 60s. At the start of Rocket's story, Little Dice is following the Tender Trio. We follow Shaggy, Clipper, and Goose, who are kind of like your local Robin Hood hoodlums around the slum. You know, they'll rob from the rich, I suppose, and give back to the poor. But they're ultimately trying to make money for themselves so that they can become big gang lords. And Little Dice is watching them, and he wants to be the lord of the slums.
Charuto preto, filho da macumba, quer falar merda.
And you watch him join them on a small robbery at a motel, and the Tender Trio don't want to kill anybody. But then when they leave, Little Dice just walks in there and just starts blowing people away. You know, he murders like the whole motel.
It's the laughter
in
his eyes
Yeah.
that just tells you that this is a monster.
And then as he grows up, he's just performing hits. And, you know, it's a common thing in gangs and gangster films as well, where, you know, the local hoodlums see this scary guy and they kind of latch onto him. And then before you know it, he's got a following. And it's kind of like a meat shield. He's got a meat shield around him where he'll put them in harm's way before he'll get hurt, and then he'll get the credit for dealing with all this stuff.
I love the depiction of the hierarchy of the drug lord system,
Yes.
all the way down to the kids that are sort of on the lookout,
Yeah.
or pushing the drugs, or selling the drugs, or just transferring the money around. I love the scenes where you see them chucking huge bags of cocaine from rooftop to rooftop,
Yes.
just passing it through, and you're just seeing how the system works, and I love the exploration of that.
Se o tráfico fosse legal, o pequeno ia ser o homem do ano. Vai tirar onda.
I mean, our main star is obviously Rocket, and you know he's based on a real life character. He's based on a young lad who wanted to get out of the slums. You know, he wanted to just not be involved in the gangs because he obviously all the guns, all the killings. You know, he even says at one point that, you know, I just don't want to be shot. I don't want to join the police. I don't want to join the gangs. I want to do something different. And it's the first time he sees, I believe it's Goose in the 60s. He sees Goose get gunned down, and he sees a camera for the first time and realizes that's what he wants to do. That's what he wants to be. He wants to be a photographer. So you've got this positivity in the film now, that you want Rocket to get out. You want him to do well. And I suppose you kind of already know how it's going to turn out, because this story would not be known unless somebody had managed to get out of the slums and tell it to the world. But it's, like you said, it's just the interaction that Rocket has with Little Z and Benny. I love Benny, and I always hate what happens to Benny, because Benny and Little Z have started off on the streets, little kids robbing people, and so they have grown up together. They are brothers. They are closer than family. But as they get control of the drug area and they start raking in all the money, Little Z wants power. He is power mad. He just wants to control everybody and everything. And Benny just kind of wants to enjoy life, you know. And so he starts to actually, he sees another guy with a ginger afro and freckles, which is always kind of off-putting, you know, especially in Rio de Janeiro. And he says to him, like, you know, oh, here's a bunch of money. Go out and get me some designer clothes. Get me some designer shoes. I want to look good. I want to be a playboy. And so Benny starts to become the cool gang leader. You know, he's the voice of reason to Little Z's madness. And Little Z won't do anything if Benny tells him not to. But then things transpire and stuff starts to intersect, and craziness starts to go around up until the point where Benny is shot instead of Little Z. And you just realize as soon as you see Benny die, you're just like, well, that's it.
Well, the whole equilibrium just sort of collapses at this point, because Benny had sort of united the whole of Rio de Janeiro together.
Yeah.
He was the good guy who was doing bad things. And it's someone else who's after revenge against Little Z who does shoot and kill Benny. And it upsets everybody. All of the battle lines are brought back forward. The conflict between Carrot and Little Z is now in full effect, because Benny's not there to hold either of them back and just go, look, you know, we can work it out.
Yeah.
And so removing that character then just thrusts the film into real anarchy. And we are also introduced earlier into the film to a character called Knockout Ned.
Yeah.
And Knockout Ned actually had earlier scenes as well where he was kind of bullied by Lil Z. And then, of course, we see him on the train later where Rocket was dancing or flirting with crime.
Yeah.
And deciding, actually, he's too good a guy, I'm not going to bother him. And then at the same party where Benny is killed, Knockout Ned is forced to strip down naked and bounce his ass and wave it for Lil Z's amusement. Because as we figure out, Lil Z, despite having all this power and money and drugs, he cannot date a woman. He cannot talk to women. He has no idea what to do. And I like the fact that humanizes that character even more so, that you can be right at the top and still not know how to talk to a girl.
Yeah.
Não, obrigada, eu tô acompanhada.
Even if it's me, if it means it's me.
It's his weakness, isn't it? You know, he can't just take a girl out like Benny can. He's either got to force himself onto her or pay for her. And even though that still feeds into his power, just trying to do it normal, like normal people, is just too much for him.
And that turns him into a psychopath, essentially.
Yeah.
And so he does track Knockout Ned down and the girl that he did ask out at the party, and he rapes her. And not only that, he tracks Knockout Ned back to his house and kills his brother and his uncle.
Yes.
Which really starts the turf war. Well, Knockout Ned has said constantly, I'm not a hoodlum, I don't want anything to do with it, but when pushed, he's going to take a gun and defend himself. And we follow his journey as well. And it's kind of sad that he got pushed to this extreme, but living in this environment, it happens. And so we see him get to the point where he's like, we're not killing anyone. We're not going to kill anyone. Exception to the rule being if we're about to be killed.
Yeah.
And you see him shoot and kill that security guard when they're robbing the bank. And you're just like... So even the good guys are falling,
Yes.
really.
Yeah.
And there's... and of course, Knockout Ned does eventually get arrested, get put into jail. But the film does move into the 70s. And it follows about 15 years of time in this location before he's released again. And we eventually come all the way back to the beginning of the film and the film's climax.
One of the scenes I always like to talk about, I think it's a little twist that sometimes I completely forgot about it. And it's the scene at the beginning when Little Dice becomes Little Z and he talks to, I don't know, a voodoo priest or an aged gang lord or something. And the guy says to him, I'm going to give you this amulet, this necklace for protection. It'll protect you so that you can take over the whole of the drug businesses, but you cannot fornicate while wearing this amulet or you will lose my protection. And it actually leads on to him raping Knockout Ned's girlfriend while wearing the necklace. That after that, everything just seems to go down for Little Z. And, you know, I've seen this film a couple of times, and this time for the review, you only see it in the glimpse, the flash, while he's raping Ned's girlfriend, and you see the beads, and I went, right, yes, now I can see why all this falls apart. The runt scenes as well, you know, like we said, there are a group of children who are just wild, running the streets, robbing people, stealing whatever they can, and some of their scenes, you know, they're just really brilliantly done because it makes you realize that it doesn't matter how old you are or where you come from. When you're living in this area, you can easily just get caught up in the gang warfare. And the gang leaders, they really don't care. They need more troops. They need more delivery boys. They need more lookouts. So, oh, you got a problem? Here's a gun. You don't like that guy? Here's a gun. You want to join our gang? Here's a gun. And it's that scene as well with Knockout Ned when he first meets Otto, and Otto just says, you know, I want to find the man who I want to kill the man who killed my dad, and that will take a serious twist towards the end of the film.
O que tu quer?
Quero me vingar do assassino que matou meu pai.
Como é que é teu nome?
Eu me chamo Otto.
Aí, ó.
There's a couple of other power-hungry, mad Little Z moments that have always stuck with me in this film, and I put it down to the power of this child's acting.
Yeah.
And when he's crying, when he's been shot in the foot, and he's holding his ankle and holding his foot, and this other kid is just looking down the barrel of the gun, and Lil Z's like, you want to be part of the gang? Choose one of these two and kill him.
Yeah.
And it's just horrible. It's gut-wrenchingly horrible. Of course, he kills the older kid, and the little kid who's still crying is forced off down the alleyway, and he's told not even to hobble.
Yeah.
And you just feel sick watching it. But that's the power of this film. That's the power of the acting in this film. That it all becomes documentary-esque with its handheld camera work,
Yes.
its fast pacing. There's never a dull moment in this film.
The film really just hits home with the realism. I mean, you can sit there and you can watch The Godfather and Scarface and many a British gangster movie as much as you want. But City of God really does, for me personally, when I first watched it, it made me go, shit, this is real. You know, this shit isn't just make-believe. This shit happens on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it was only going back to, 2010, the Rio de Janeiro Olympics, that the police force over there finally just went, actually, we kind of want tourists to come back to Rio de Janeiro, so let's go into the favelas. Let's take out as many gang lords as we can, you know, and try to make the place safe.
I think they statistically reduced the crime from like 50+% down to like 39%
Yeah.
control. So the war against the hoodlums and those with drug trafficking and pushing violence in Brazil, it's still going on today. And as we see in this film, we see the generations looking up at the ones above them and seeing that the power that they have and
Yeah.
the respect that they get from people, deciding that this cycle's not going to end. Even at the very end of the film, once the new status quo is about to be set, we see these little kids running off talking about the next big threat, which is close to town, which did actually happen, and so the cycle of violence has not yet ended, and it's a shame, but it does make for one hell of a film that does have some fantastic scenes in it, and there are so many memorable moments in the film that I'm just going to pick one. Other than the whole film, there's just one moment. It's a recurring sort of joke in the film. Yeah. And it's when Tuba tries to chime in and say something, and he's always told to shut up. Yeah. And then there's a scene where both Lil Z has got an arm wound and Tuba's been shot in the arm, and he's like, yeah, we're like brothers. We both got shot in the arm. And Lil Z just shoots him dead.
Quem tá de mané galinha é bom mesmo, hein, Zé? 12 bandidos pra correr assim do nada, maluco. Ele chegou do nada. Cala a boca, meu irmão. Chato pra caralho, porra.
And you're just like...
You talk too much, Tuba.
So it's a very darkly comedic moment in the film, which is needed after so much harshness and reality that's going on.
For me, I mean, like you said, I've got a lot of favourite scenes, but they're all just pretty fucking harsh, and that's how this film comes across to me. Shaggy trying to carjack the driver at the beginning of the film when the police have come in, and he's got to get out and push. And I think it's pretty funny that he stops the car, and then the driver actually says this car's a piece of shit, you know, and his girlfriend convinces Shaggy to get out and push the car, but then Shaggy is chased by the police and gunned down. But it's the camera work, you know, it's the music, it's the fact you can't hear the gunfire, and the fact that Shaggy actually detours to get away from the car so that the police don't get his girlfriend, and then you just find him bloodied in a pool on the floor. And yet then Rocket turns up and sees the camera, and I suppose that's the spark of inspiration for him to try and get out. I love Rocket's explanation about how the gangs work, how the drug trafficking works, just the ins and out, and the fact that, you know, he's not part of the gang, but he sees it enough to understand it, or hears it enough to understand it, that he's able to explain it to you, and you sit there going, shit, you know, that's pretty fucking easy to follow. And yet these guys who, you know, they haven't been to college, they can't barely read, they can, you know, barely write, but they've got this system in place of dealing narcotics to absolutely anybody and everybody. The shooting of the runts, another favourite scene. It's, like I said, it's the camera work, it's the crying children. I mean, those fucking children need fucking Oscars. I mean, I don't even know if they were really shot in the foot, but you kind of sit there, and being a parent, you look at this small child while he's crying, and you're just like, God, you know, where are their parents? Where are they? Well, they're either dead, and these children are orphans, or they're addicts, you know, and they've sold all this stuff, so that's why the kid isn't in school. And it's just heartbreaking. I love that camera shot after Steak and Fries has shot the other boy, but the boy's blurred in the distance, and the angle that he's laying at, and Steak is just kind of sat there, you know, getting to grips to what he's done. He's now a man for what he's done. My last favourite scene, it's really hard to really put this into context, but Little Z is just such a brilliant character, and he's played so brilliantly that a lot of his scenes are just funny as fuck, even though he's being scary and intimidating. And it's after Benny's death that Little Z just goes, fuck it, I'm gonna go kill Kara and take over his business. So he's walking with his army, and Rocket actually says, you know, only a miracle could stop this from happening, and where better to get a miracle than in the city of God. And that is where Little Z comes across Knockout Ned's girlfriend, and obviously follows her, rapes her, and, you know, sends Knockout Ned on his way. But it's the part after where Ned is sat in his home, and he says he can't look at his girlfriend in the face, and says, why didn't that fucker kill me? And the camera shoots back to Z, comes right down, and Little Z just goes,
Calma aí. Por que não matei aquele filho da puta?
And turns around from killing Kara, walks all the way back, and just kind of shoots up Ned's house, killing his uncle and his brother, and obviously sets Ned on the pathway to have this war. And then the finale. The finale is just amazing. The fall of Ned, the fall of Little Z, and the eventual rise of Rocket.
I absolutely recommend City of God. It is nigh on a masterpiece in film. There's a reason why it has been rated so highly by film critics, why it still has an incredibly high rating on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes or wherever else you go for your film criticisms or film rankings. This is a must-see foreign language film from Brazil, and it is fantastic, even down to some of the improvised moments where the filmmakers weren't even aware that culturally that this is something that they do when they're about to go to war, or when they're about to have a huge shootout with a rival drug pusher. They all get together and they pray.
Pai nosso que está no céu, santificado seja o nosso nome, seja feito o nosso reino, seja feita a nossa vontade.
And filmmakers didn't know that they did that. And so the actors were like, hey, why aren't we doing this scene? And so they actually filmed that scene, and that goes into the film, and it's great because the camera sort of jumps between character to character and continues the prayer as it's setting up what's soon to be this final confrontation. There's another little small improvised bit at the end as well where one of the kid comes back in and picks up his shoe. And that wasn't improvised. That was a real kid who had forgotten his shoe and come back to pick it up.
Yeah.
And it just perfectly just blends into the film. So it's a case of everything that these filmmakers did right, with the camera work, with the music, with the actors, with the setting, with the pacing, with the editing. It's with the narration, with breaking it down into story segments, into chapters, going through the time of the 60s and 70s that this film does. It's outstanding. It's mesmerizing. It's a film you're going to re-watch again and again, not just because of the story, but just because of the technical level of the filmmaking. It really is quite a fine accomplishment. So much so that when they'd finished production, the cast and crew knew that they had something and they wanted to do a sequel. They were like, well, what about we carry on telling the story of these characters? And there has been a sequel film, which I think was a continuation of the TV series, which also came off the back of this film.
City of Men. City of Men is not as hard-hitting as City of God, but you kind of owe it yourself. If you've seen City of God, you have to go see City of Men, just so you've completed that.
Yeah, it's
segment.
An extension of it. So literally, if this film leaves you wanting more, which it probably will do, there is more for you to go and explore after that.
I definitely recommend City of God. I've always tried to kind of advertise it and force it onto people, but you kind of know who can endure it and who can't. You know, there are people out there who don't like gang violence. You know, they try to shy away from the fact that this stuff does happen. But I always try to say, look, you know, you like film. This film has everything. There are some giant fucking pieces of shit in cinema, but this is not one.
Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.
Quem tá de mané galinha é bom mesmo, hein, Zé? Hein, Zé? 12 bandidos pra correr assim do nada, maluco. Ele chegou do nada. Cala a boca, meu irmão. Chato pra caralho, porra.